This is a production of Cornell University.
Fabulous. So today I'll be talking about my work the past couple of years that I've been here in establishing breeding priorities and developing cultivars for organic vegetable growers here in the Northeast. Organic growers, as I'm sure you all know, face unique challenges to their production. Because of the organic standard, which was put in place in 2002, there are limitations on the sorts of materials that organically certified growers can use in their production. So there are a couple of major differences between organic and conventional growers. One is the issue of soil fertility. Without synthetic fertilizers, organic farms are often quite nitrogen limited. Though organic growers do have ways of managing their soil fertility, increasing the nitrogen through the application of animal manure and nitrogenous cover crops, it's still often the case that there's less nitrogen available for their plants. And organic growers, like conventional growers, face major disease and pest pressures. But unlike conventional growers, where there are quite effective chemically based management tools, organic growers often lack effective approved materials to manage these challenges. And so they're more often reliant on genetic resistance to these challenges than conventional growers. Weed management is also a big issue in organic production, and organic growers also need to use organically certified seed. So the organic farm is different from a conventional farm, but there's a question of, do we need to be breeding for organic management? Aren't we already breeding for disease-resistant and nutrient use-efficient plants? We are, but but when it comes to organic farms, organic production, there's a difference of priorities. So with disease resistance, for example, there are diseases that are well managed under conventional production systems. Common bunt in wheat, for example, has been very effectively managed through the use of seed treatments, which are not approved materials for organic growers. And so that's an instance where disease resistance, where genetic resistance would be more important, a higher priority for organic growers. So for organic production to be particularly successful, growers need varieties that excel under organic conditions, which means that we need to be trialing varieties under organic management if they're meant for organic growers, or develop varieties that are intended specifically for organics. So how do we develop those varieties? Well, one of the ways that I've been thinking about it is a matter of adaptability and stability under different environments. So this graph from Finley and Wilkinson shows a trial of barley varieties under different environments, and the x-axis shows the mean yield of all of the varieties in 7 different environments, and then every variety, their yield in those environments is plotted. So the average yield of all of the varieties is the dashed line here with a slope of 1, and varieties that these authors label as well adapted or generally adapted are those that do well under all environments, do better than average under all environments. So variety A in this instance. Variety B is an example of a poorly adapted variety. It does worse than the average across environments. Variety C is a variety with low stability. So it does particularly poorly in low yielding environments, but well when it's in a good field generally. And the particularly interesting for my purposes is variety D here, which is a variety with high stability. So it does well, it does pretty well under low low yielding environments, but it does the same generally across those environments. So the authors of this paper conclude that selecting for high yielding varieties under high yielding conditions, if you don't know how those varieties do under low yielding conditions, can result in varieties that don't particularly do well under those low yielding environments, which we can think of as being representative perhaps of organic management conditions. So for varieties that do well under good conditions, those might not be appropriate for organic growers. Dr. Kevin Murphy demonstrated this again in a study that was done in 2007 with wheat varieties, where they, in 5 different environments, looked at the yield of these varieties under conventional and organic management, and then ranked them according to yield, and showed that the yield rank changed quite drastically between conventional and organic conditions, suggesting that if this was in a breeding program, selecting for the lines that did well under conventional management would not have resulted in lines that were that good for organic. So those that did the best under organic management weren't the ones that would have been chosen under a conventional system. So there are some traits that are generally important to organic growers, those that are dictated by the standard. And then there are traits that are region or market specific, which also need to be considered when we're looking to support a particular community of growers. So in this instance, some of the work that I've done has been particular to the Northeast and organic growers here. I spoke last year about a report that we were writing that summed up results of a survey that we did asking growers, vegetable growers here in the Northeast who were using organic practices, what was most important to them and what the traits were that they would like to suggest be worked on to support their production. And so part of the report that we put out last August was a prioritization of many crop-specific trait needs for organic growers. And the top 5 sets are listed here, so those that are under bullet point 3 were all deemed to be as important, more important than 4 and 5, but not as important as 1 and 2. And you can see here that there's a mix of traits that are specific to the climate and culture of the Northeast. Oh, sorry about that. So things like stress tolerance for broccoli, heat tolerance for arugula, resistance to diseases in high tunnels, which are increasing in prevalency here for organic growers in the Northeast, and then also traits that are important for consumer demands, like the color and quality of lettuce. So we need to take the varieties that do well for the growers, that have the qualities that they're looking for, like flavor. This was a graph showing that growers rate flavor as being a really important quality in breeding efforts. So we need to take varieties that already do well in the markets for these growers and improve the traits that will help those varieties excel under Northeast organic conditions. The report that we put out last year, we put up on eCommons, and I'm hopeful that it'll be a useful tool for anyone who's interested in working on developing organic varieties, whether that's at institutions like Cornell or at seed companies across the region. So I'll talk very briefly about 2 efforts that I've been working on in developing varieties for growers here in the Northeast, but generally across the northern US under the Northern Organic Vegetable Improvement Collaborative. So one is disease-resistant, high-quality delicata squash, and the other is an early blocky bell pepper. So these are some pictures. So one of the survey results, we asked folks to rate the importance of different diseases as breeding priorities. One of the questions we asked was about powdery mildew. Most of the people who responded to the question said, yes, this is a big problem for us in cucurbit production. This is something that we would like people to focus on. So So my, so the delicata work that I've been doing, have been looking at powdery mildew resistance, and Cornell bush delicata in the far right bottom corner is the source of powdery mildew resistance that I used. A couple of summers ago, crossed it with a couple of commercial lines with higher quality. These 3 boxes here, which have, as you can see from last year, quite a lot higher severity of powdery mildew, and the breeding lines that I've been working on, I was able to fix the powdery mildew resistance using a CAPS marker that was developed in our lab, and all of those show very low powdery mildew severity in the field, which is encouraging. I also have been looking at screening the material for bricks as an assay for quality. And then the second breeding project that I've been working on is an early Blocky bell pepper. And growers here in the Northeast, organic vegetable growers, often grow this variety, which is called Ace. And folks have said that they like the variety. It produces quite a lot of fruit. It produces mature fruit earlier than other varieties that they've grown. But it could use some changes in the fruit shape. I've heard several people independently tell me that they think it looks really ugly, which maybe shouldn't matter, but apparently it does. So I've been working on that, and I crossed Ace to a blockier bell pepper called Aristotle. These were both hybrids, and last year I grew F2 families, which sounds weird to say, and looked for earliness in these lines. So the parents are Ace and Aristotle, and this is showing the percent of the plot that was flowering on July 6th. So Ace had already passed the 50% point, and Aristotle was still not really flowering. I identified 4 lines that were almost as early as Ace, if not earlier, and then looked for blocky fruit and have identified 2 promising lines that we'll be trialing along with the delicatas here in Freeville and on some organic farms here in the Northeast, well, in New York, as well as at our partner institutions in Wisconsin, Oregon, and Washington through Novick, which I'm pretty excited about. So with that, I would like to thank everybody who has been helpful, and there are many people, and our funding source of the USDA, NIFA. With that, I will maybe take a question if Uche says I can.
So we'll have just 2 questions.
Or not? Yeah, John.
You had, in your survey, you had organic growers that were certified and non-certified. Were there any differences between those 2 groups in their answers to questions?
There weren't really many, there weren't any real differences between those 2. We broke them up we asked them to self-identify whether they were certified or not certified, but the non-certified were all growers who were following NOP practices or who were naturally certified, not certified but naturally labeled. So they were using practices that were quite similar. We were curious to see if those groups had different thoughts, but they all sort of seem to have the same things to say. Yeah, Jeff?
You know the genetics of the blocky shape?
The genetics of the blocky shape, I don't remember the names of the genes that have been identified for fruit shape, but I know that there aren't many of them controlling fruit shape. That's a great question that I'll be sure to read up more closely on before my exam. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.